How do you know if you are actually in the right career or business for you? The one where your passions, skills, and unique gifts all align. Well, my guest today is an expert in this area, and she's sharing how we can get clear about what we actually want. Ashley Stahl is a counter-terrorism professional turned career coach and the author of the new book, U-Turn: Get Unstuck, Discover Your Direction, Design Your Dream Career. And Ashley's on a mission to help you step into a career you are excited about and, here's the key, aligned with. So if you are looking for more clarity and alignment heading into the new year, whether that's in your career, your business, your life, this episode is seriously so good. I know you're going to love it, so let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast. We are so close to wrapping up this year. It's hard to believe, but you guys know how I roll. I'm already planning, prepping, have been so for the new year for a while now. And we've been talking a lot about that. So this is honestly the perfect conversation to bring you as you're starting to get intentional about your new year, because I hear from so many people in our community that you're really looking for that next layer of clarity. So if that's you, listen in, because I have the perfect guest with me today and I'm so excited to have you. So Ashley, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk to you. You're so much fun to connect with. Even just texting you, I can feel the vibes. So I can only imagine this audience and who they are with you.
I was going to say, it's a certain level of, I'll even say a refined sense of humor when you can laugh out loud at someone's text exchange. And we were introduced by our mutual friend, Lori. Even in those first initial texts, I was like, oh yeah. I feel like we would laugh at each other's jokes, which is the only prerequisite to be my friend. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah. And the more I've gotten to get to know about your story, again, just going down the rabbit hole of all the work that you're doing in the world, your new book coming out, which we're going to talk about. I could not wait to get you on the podcast, because this theme of clarity, whether it's in our businesses or we do have a lot of women who listen to the show that are in the career world, I think this year shook up a lot for us. And when I feel uncertain like that, I think we really crave that sense of clarity, but it can be a beautiful refining period to get there.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's so interesting about purpose, especially in your career, is that it moves, and in your life. And so it's interesting because I think one of the most sabotaging things we do in our career is we become reactive and we start holding on to plans for the sake of having them. We start to hold on to a sense of ground so that we don't feel so groundless. But the groundlessness that I think we're all facing this year is actually closer to the truth of the groundlessness that really is. And it's just calling us forward to create more security within ourselves. So that means if you're an entrepreneur, really getting clear on what you're capable of, being willing to pivot. And I think if you're in the workforce, it really means remembering that your security comes from yourself and that it comes from creating options for yourself. And you can't be beholden to your employer or so loyal to them that you forget yourself, because the moment that their numbers aren't adding up, you are going to be on the chopping block unless you are a top performer. And usually it's really hard to be a top performer unless you absolutely are crystal clear on what you're doing and you love what you're doing.
Yes. Oh, I'm we could legit end the podcast there. That was so
anyway, nice to meet you all.
Right. Yeah. You can tell when someone has, obviously you've been bringing this book into the world. You are so in your work right now and having a lot of these conversations. I'm sure, that theme comes up over and over again. And it makes me think about, I've shared this on a previous podcast. When I started my first career, before becoming an entrepreneur, I was in the commercial construction industry and had the fortune truly of starting that career right as the recession was about to hit. having no idea my industry would be rocked, my life would be rocked, and that fear of am I actually going to have a job was real every single day. It really, that uncertainty forced me to take a serious look at some things, and I know we're going to get into that today. Just really how I think these moments in our lives can give us a beautiful sense of clarity if we're willing to go for the roller coaster ride of not knowing.
Yes. Absolutely. And it's funny, even in the book, one of the chapters, I talk about this concept that my grandma used to always impart upon me. I remember I was in like middle school and I tried out for the play and I really wanted to get the lead role. And I kept making her drive me to school to see if the list was, cast list was on the door. And she kept saying to me, like, the quality of your life is tied to your relationship with the divine unknown. And some people, when they are faced with the unknown, are going to grab for more and create more chaos. Other people are going to sit in the unknown and wait until the answer comes to them. I think that you are just in your most powerful when you're in your most calm state. And so I hope that this podcast conversation helps people with some actionable tools so that they can get calm and connect to themselves, because I don't think we all really actually need clarity. I think we need to connect to ourselves. And once you're connected to yourself, it's kind of easy to notice what you're drawn towards. It's kind of easy to notice what your skills are. It's when you're not connected to yourself that you can't even notice any of this stuff.
So good and so true. Okay, so before we dive into all of that, because we really want this to be, I want this to make those of you listening think differently. I want this to make you really look within. But I know I would love to hear more of your journey to finding this path for yourself, because they got to hear in your bio, how do you go from counter-terrorism to career expert, career consultant? You've got to take me on that journey, the parts that you want to share, because I think this is really going to give us a beautiful platform to have this conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think, obviously that's not the most obvious career pivot.
Super linear, very linear.
Totally makes sense. But let's face it, the most interesting people I've ever met don't have a linear career. And I think that's because who we are as people is not linear. Opportunities come out of nowhere and they pull us to the side if we want to go and check them out. And so I think honoring who you are and treating your career as an experiment that can meet you where you are is so critical. And it doesn't mean that you need to turn your resume into a graveyard of trial and error. It means counterterrorism, because I had family on the East Coast during 9/11, and I was a natural ever since I was a kid at learning foreign languages. I was fluent in Spanish by like age 5. I started taking French classes in middle school. There was an assignment one day that the teacher gave us. It was French 1. He said, bring a photograph to class and describe it in French. And it was like basic vocabulary. So I was watching all these students like fumble and bumble through their pictures because we don't speak the language. And I got up there and I just started speaking so quickly. It was almost like a past life. I must have learned French. And from there on out, I just always had an interest on culture. My family was always kind of arguing about politics. So for better or for worse, I had some sort of skewed opinion on it. And it just seemed natural for me when I got to college to commit to the government, especially with Osama bin Laden being the topic in the news and taking our shoes off in the airport. Like, I wanted to matter in my career. I wanted to help and I wanted to protect. And I've always had that mama bear inside of me. So all of this combined kind of took me into college, where I think, like a lot of people, I just knew what I was interested in. I didn't really know what to do to make sense of it. And I remember going to the career services office and asking the woman, like, I don't know what I want to do. And she gave me all these like bland platitudes that we all get, like, follow your passion, do what you love. Like, what is that one? And the money will follow. Like, honestly, following your passion is a very valuable thing. And so are your interests. But there's a very big distinction of what interest is meant to actually be turned into a career path. And I think a lot of people have a lot of misunderstandings around what interests or hobbies are meant to stay hobbies and which ones are meant to be careers. And one thing I learned along my journey was that there's just such a huge difference between being a happy and stimulated consumer of something. Like, I was very stimulated by government. I was very stimulated by political books. I majored in history, government, and French, triple major because I was just
Why not?
indecisive. Yeah, not an overachiever, really just chaotic and indecisive. And ended up just kind of saying to myself, like, I love this information. And later I realized just because I love it doesn't mean I'm a producer of it. Just because I love movies shouldn't mean that I'm going to go make films. I love cupcakes. I'm not going to be a baker. I loved politics. I thought I was going to be carrying homeland. And I graduated during the recession and just completely fell off the cliff like every millennial, couldn't get a job, slept on my parents' couch, ended up making minimum wage at an ad agency. And from there, I was just so in pain, like realizing that this was going to be my career path if I didn't do something about it. And I was so scared of that being my new normal. And it's interesting, like, I hate to say it this way, but it feels like sometimes people just aren't scared enough to act. And it's not that you need to be afraid to act, but that seems to be a very potent thing that instigates people to act. And so in my career, I was like, the only thing worse than how bad it would feel to put myself out there is being here. And so I contacted my college and said, do you have a list of alumni who have graduated and moved to DC? And they sent me 2,000 names, emails, and phone numbers. And every single day, I cold emailed, I cold called, I put myself out, I fell on my face. And then eventually, out of all 2,000 people, about 1 to 200 of them responded, helped me in some way, took the phone call, connected me to someone. I got the confidence to move to DC. And that process, kind of like following what felt right, like listening to that elegant idea inside of my head, taught me how to job hunt because I was so willing to learn how to talk to people. I was so willing to see my career as a numbers game, like contact so many people that I knew that something good would happen. And I think that's all of our responsibilities, is to put so much energy out there that it almost doesn't make sense not to get something back. And so I've met so many people in my keynote talks over the years who they'll stand up and ask me from the audience, like, why can't I get paid what I'm worth? And it's like, that's not about what you're getting paid. It's about you not creating options for yourself. You're not knocking on enough doors because options get you paid. And so for me, I got really good at job hunting and I ended up accepting a position at the Pentagon in DC. And it was my first day, and that's what I open up my book U-Turn on, is my first day at the Pentagon, realizing, holy shit, this was my dream and I'm not in the right place.
Oh,
and I
man.
totally get why like celebrities like Britney Spears like shave their head. It's like we chase our dreams thinking we're going to feel a certain way, and then we don't when we get there. And that's kind of a blessing that I was able to experience that early on. So that translated into me doing little coffee networking groups, helping friends get job offers, rewriting their resumes with everything I'd learned through hundreds of conversations. And people would say, you should be a career coach. I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, I'm 25 years old. Like, what does that even mean? And then here I am, like 10 years later, I've got, like the podcast and the book, and, I'm a spokesperson. I do all sorts of things. And it really started with following what felt right, even against reason. Like, there was something about counterterrorism that I was like, why am I doing this? But I was interested enough. And even something inside me that was like, I don't know if this is my ultimate destination, but something about following it anyway felt right at that time. And that's all we can really do with our decisions. And on the periphery of that, I learned how to job hunt. On the periphery of following what felt good, I learned how to network. I learned how to help people. I learned how to create a business. So that's what really my long-winded version of what brought me here today.
No, but it's all so valuable because I think that journey, and now I'm like, we've had such a lovely conversation. I can't remember if this was before we started recording or not. So I'm going to go back there about really developing that powerful relationship to our own intuition. I
Yeah.
think that is one of the most, it's a skill I never learned. I never learned in school or any professional training, but it's quite literally been the backbone of my entrepreneurial journey, of how you and I are sitting here having this
Yeah.
conversation. And I love to tell people even, that I used to sell carpet because
Yeah.
for me that was a very intuitively led decision. I just felt like that was a yes.
Mhm.
And I didn't know why, and I didn't really question it. So talk
Yeah.
to me a little bit more about the importance of that. And then how do you actually freaking develop that kind of self-awareness?
Yeah, well, I love talking about intuition because I think some of the most impressive business leaders that I've seen always mention it. When you start to read their autobiography or whatever have you, you'll eventually hear them talk about gut feelings or whatever they want to call intuition. I mean, let's face it, it's called your second brain for a reason. There's 200 million, if not more, neurons in your gut. And that's why when your stomach feels like it's sinking, like a bad feeling, it's intelligent. There's an intelligence to that. And so I think there's a couple of levels to intuition for me. The first level is just hearing what I'm thinking, like my thoughts. And the second level is noticing what my body is feeling. And at any given time, I don't know if there's such a thing as totally being neutral. We're either expanding or contracting, like I don't know if we're just sitting there. I haven't really sat with that thought long enough. But when it comes to intuition, I find that it's absolute. So the thoughts from intuition are usually along the lines of, this is good for me. This isn't good for me. That's it. Anything beyond that, like the emotionality, the emoting of this is good for me, but I'm afraid, like the whole conversation that comes from there, that's fear, that's ego. But intuition is literally just that nudge of like, yes, check that out. No, don't check that out. And that's how clean it is. And if you can't hear it, it's like you just need to do the work of connecting to yourself. And we tend to get cut off from our intuition when we are cut off from ourselves. And I think the way that that happens is we say yes to too many things that we don't actually want to say yes to. We make other people's opinions more important than our own. We don't set boundaries so that there's space around us to actually be ourselves. And so I would say if you are in that camp where you feel like you're cut off from your intuition, grab a piece of paper and make a list of things, places, people, whatever have you, that make you feel like you. So in my case, the ocean makes me feel like me. Like when I go to the ocean, I'm so much more myself. I feel so connected. When I see a few friends, my friend Amanda, my friend Nicole, I feel myself.
Yeah.
And once I feel myself, it's like a well of energy comes out of me, a well of ideas come out of me. And I also love to journal when I'm in that state after I've reconnected to myself. And for anybody listening, that could be a cooking class, a dance class. It could just be a conversation with someone. Just get connected to who makes you feel connected or what. And then from that place, I love to journal. And I love prompts. And I actually email my list every single week, a different journal prompt on Mondays. And my favorite one is the most basic one, probably is, what do I need to know? And I just let my pen write, and I never know what it's going to tell me. Another one I'll write is, what's making me feel stressed right now? And I start to write out all of the things. And sometimes that allows me to get leverage on, like, does this deserve my stress? Like, can I release these feelings now? So these sorts of things get me back into my intuition. And then I can start to notice in a conversation, like, oh, maybe I'm going to check that out. Like that job that that person has is interesting, or that brand deal that they just got is inspiring. And so the what do I need to know question can kind of get you back into like, oh, I'm interested in a few things I didn't even pay attention to the fact that I was interested in.
Ooh, that's so good. So I love how you were sharing earlier. I think this is kind of like a great place to go now that we've touched on this topic of intuition is, there are these platitudes around finding your purpose, figuring out what you really want, of follow your heart, whatever it is, insert nice
Yeah.
words that you could retweet.
Yeah.
But those have to at some point intersect with things that you're actually good at. I mean, you talk about these core skill sets
Mhm.
that I'm curious to hear how you take people on the journey of where is the intersection between those and how does that help direct us, whether it's in our career, in our entrepreneurial endeavors. Maybe give us a rundown of what those are. And then I'm really curious to hear how you take people on that journey.
Yeah, I have 10 core skill sets that I talk about in chapter 2 of my book that I can outline for everybody who's note taking here. I would say my fundamental belief about anyone's career is that who you are and what your core skill set is matters more than what you love.
Mm,
So you might love fashion, but if you love fashion, that's just a backdrop. Like I love travel and I love five-star hotels, but if I'm the janitor or the chef in the hotel, like it's not going to be the time I'm meant to be having. So it's really important to realize that your skill set really ties back to how you're harnessing your energy throughout the day. That your skill set reflects the job title that you're in or the business services that you offer. And that becomes your reality, is the practice of how you're harnessing your energy through those services, through those responsibilities. That's what your 9 to 5 or 9 to 9, if you're a crazy entrepreneur like I used to be, all the time, is. And so it's so important to be able to really get connected to the question of, when am I at my best? Like, what skill set am I using? And your interests, your passions, your industry, it all matters. It just doesn't matter quite as much as the skill set. So I think of these 10 core skill sets I have as energies, not just like tactical things. And the first one is innovation. So when you think about the innovation skill set, this is the intrapreneur, the person running their own book of business, or the creative self-starter within a company, or it's the entrepreneur, but they like to solve big problems. They're highly creative. They're highly visionary. You know when you're around one. The second one would be building. So that could be quite literal, like a mechanic or a construction worker, having you come from a construction site. But well, then again, your skill set probably wasn't
Mine was
around
sales.
building. Yeah, exactly. So that's
I'm like, I built nothing.
Exactly. So you were the third core skill set, which is words. But the second core skill set of building could be as literal, like we were saying, as a construction worker. It could also be less literal, like a web developer who energetically is in building something. The third is words, and that is where our sales friends are. That's where our speakers, our writers are. One question that's really huge to ask yourself as you look through these core skill sets and figure out which one is yours is, are you introverted or are you extroverted? And this is a really big deal because I'm actually quite introverted. People just don't know that, because in my friendship circle, I'm super extroverted. But in business, I'm actually a little bit more reserved. I'm a little bit more quiet. I'm a keynote speaker. I'll go on stage, but after that, I'll knock out for like 2 days. I'm so winded because I'm such an introvert. Yeah.
Yeah. And it took a while for me to make that distinction.
Yeah, it did for me too, because it's like when you're good at words, sometimes, or anything. So this applies to any of the skill sets, but I think especially words. The introverted person is more of the writer and content creator behind their laptop. The extrovert is a little bit more of the speaker and the salesperson who's pitching clients. So it's pretty key to know that about yourself.
Yeah.
And then the fourth skill set is motion. And this one's kind of an interesting one because I don't think people realize the ability to be on your feet all day, like the desire and skill. It is a skill. So these are the fitness trainers, the masseuses, even the tour guides, like people who are just built their life around their gift of being on their feet. People can't all do that. And number 5 is service. So this is actually another good one to ask a couple of questions. One question is, am I wounded or inspired? Because a lot of people in service think that service is their thing, like the humanitarians, the helpers, the supporters. But some people learn to be a people pleaser as a coping mechanism growing up, and they're not actually inspired to be in the service core skill set. It's a gift they force themselves to learn, not one that they naturally have potentially. So just a good question to ask yourself also throughout all of these core skill sets. And then the second one is coordinating. So I love this one because my business just wouldn't even run without the coordinators. Like, these are the events people, the operations people, the project managers. And then number 7, another skill set I don't think I have, is analysis. And I had to live in this one at the Pentagon because I did a lot of intelligence work. And I mean, if anyone right now is listening and they're exhausted in their job, usually it's one of two things. Either you're forcing yourself to override whatever your core skill set is and operate out of a different core skill set, or you have core values that are being violated by your job, usually. But the analysis core skill set, number 7, that's the researcher, the academic, the economist. And then number 8 is our little number cruncher friends. So the investment bankers, the accountants. And then number 9 is technology. So the IT geniuses, the artificial intelligence creators. And number 10 is beauty. So these are the people who make art of the world around us, the architects, the jewelry designers, the makeup people, the interior designers, all of it. And I think once you kind of know which one of these 10 you are, you really set yourself up to say, okay, this core skill set is the umbrella. It's what I'm going to carry with me throughout my career. So now let me get clear on all of the different ways I can be expressing this one core skill set. And a good question to ask everybody in your life, if you don't know your core skill set, is when have you seen me at my best? And if you can ask your parents, a couple of friends, and especially a couple of colleagues, you can take a look at when have people seen you at your best and what does that mean about your core skill set? What skill set are you using when you're at your best? And people tend to have two or three they resonate with, but we really lead with one in our career. And so it's important to really know what is that one.
And is there just one typically? That was going to be my next question is
Yeah.
typically one that leads. Yeah.
Yeah, because I would say when you're hired for a job, especially in the workforce, you're hired for one type of responsibility. It can look many ways, but they're hiring one skill that makes sense in many different responsibilities. So if your core skill set is words and technology, maybe you'll be a salesperson at a tech company if you're an extrovert, or maybe you'll be a training person and like teaching people stuff through your words at a tech company. So the secondary one does matter. Like if you combine a motion person with innovation, maybe you'll get like a fitness influencer, like an entrepreneurial fitnessy type. So the combinations do matter to just consider, especially if you're an entrepreneur. But in the workforce, you've got to know your number one and be really clear on how to talk about that so that even if you're making a career pivot, usually you can take your core skill set from the past, make sense of how you've used it, and carry it with you into the future through your communication.
Yeah. Okay, so this is actually shedding a lot of light on how, and you mentioned burnout in your career as an entrepreneur. I think what can often lead to burnout when we start a business is not being at the point where we can hire someone in their core competency. So we're trying to be all of the things, thinking that there's this miraculous time where we'll be able to. But speak maybe to our more entrepreneurial audience, and as a fellow entrepreneur, what is there for us to learn from analyzing these core competencies and strengths? And for me, it's giving me this huge aha because I'm on this big, like, we're going to be hiring and really growing our team a lot in 2021. So I've been on this journey too of really looking like, where are mine, and then who do I need around me to support me?
Yeah, such a beautiful question. I love the question of who do I need around me? That's a journal prompt, But you asked about burnout, and I love that topic because I think burnout can come from a couple of things, like I was saying, like not working out of your core skill set and having to force yourself to be someone that you're naturally not. Secondly, is core values. Like all of us have maybe 5 top core values that are non-negotiable fundamental principles of that root into who we are. And I think one of the mistakes people make when they choose their core values is they pick words that are too aspirational, words that are like, I want to be this, but you're not actually. And it's harder to honor yourself when you're not crystal clear on like, what words are, without that word, I'm not me anymore, like that deep for you. And so once you kind of get clear on that, if your core value is integrity and you're working for an oil company that just had an oil spill, like maybe you're not, or you're selling something you don't believe in, that's going to burn you out because you're going against the grain of what you care about. And it's a constant push to be that person. And as far as burnout goes, so whether it's a core skill set issue, a core values issue, which really is an issue of the what versus the how, like the what of what you're doing or the how of how it looks, the culture or whatever that is. But I think there's 4 causes of burnout. The first one I would say is a lack of purpose, like a lack of connection to what you're doing. You don't really see the point of it. The second one is a lack of power. I think a lot of people will burn out if they feel like there's nothing they can do to make the situation better, like it's out of their control. And I think a lot of people in corporate do feel this, like there's somebody, higher on the chain that's making a decision that they have to execute on. I think a lack of sleep is an obvious one. And then a final one I would actually say is a lack of community. Like if you look at history, I was a history major. We operated in such a tribal way for so many centuries. It is in our genetic makeup to be in community. And when we don't have support, when we don't have validation, when we can't be understood, you feel alone and you only have so much bandwidth to allow yourself that feeling until you start to get tired and you don't have anyone else to help you energize. So I would say anybody who's listening who's burnt out right now, like listen when it starts, don't let it keep going, or else it's going to cost you so much more than it needs to.
So well said. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I mean that's literally the whole reason this community exists, because it's so easy to get into that place. Okay, so I am loving these questions, journal prompts that you've given us throughout the episode. I think there's so many, and if you're listening to this while you're running or driving or something where you could not write them down, go back and re-listen and write some of these down. But I'm going to ask you for, if there were one powerful question all of us can ask ourselves as we're ending 2020. I didn't prep you for this, so
Yeah.
we could just go with whatever your intuition says.
Yeah.
Do you have one? Do you have one that you would say all of us could benefit from asking ourselves?
Yeah. I would say ask yourself, what do I know that I wish I didn't know? Because I think all of us are hiding from things that we know. We know what we know, and we spend a lot of time hiding from it. And it really keeps us from moving forward in our life. And the thing is, who you are always wins. What you really want, who you really are, it's going to shine through. You can't push the mountain, push the river forever. So what do you know that you wish you didn't, so that you can start facing it now?
Hmm. What's something you know that you wish you didn't know?
One thing that I know about myself that I wish I didn't is that I'm more in my work, at least. There's a lot of different things, but in my work is that I'm more of a content creator than a peopler. Like I feel like I don't know, I've been coaching people for a very long time and I love my clients, but I'm not meant to take on that many clients because I'm just so introverted sometimes. And I think it's really inconvenient to know that, because it requires me to rework my business in ways that I have been,
Yeah.
and decline a lot of opportunities, which it sucks to decline things when you're an entrepreneur. You feel like you want to be a yes person, but
Yeah.
you can't.
I'm I'm like you, just freakishly spoke some serious truth into my life, I think. Just that I think there is this cool journey of finding your own strengths. And maybe because I'm committed to living that life that's not in burnout, and yeah, having to step up in even just who I'm empowering around me. So that definitely hit home.
Mm,
Um, so you have a book coming out
yeah.
into the world in 2021.
Mhm.
And we were jamming a little bit before we started the episode just about that process and that journey. Um, Tell us, of course, about the book, U
Yeah.
Turn. And I'd love to hear just what's your intention for it? What do you hope for this book to create as far as a ripple effect in the world once it's in our hands?
I love talking about the book, honestly, still. Like, it's so interesting. So it's called U Turn, Get Unstuck, Discover Your Direction, Design Your Dream Career. And I really wanted to empty out my brain of what I've learned over the past 10 years, helping hundreds of thousands of people with job hunting, whether it's in courses or podcasts or whatever. And I find that my intention for the book would be to give that 11-step roadmap that I cover in the 12 chapters, give that curriculum to so many institutions that have audiences that aren't really clear on what they want to do with their career, and they need to be clear. So that could be everything from universities, colleges, schools, your podcast listeners, anyone that feels like they need to course correct in their career. You can't possibly read this book without getting more clarity on what your next move should be, what's more true for you. And there's something really empowering and also humbling to realize, like, I don't have to help people one by one by one. I can put a body of work onto the pages of a book and let it have the ripple effect it's meant to. So, yeah, that would be my intention.
That's so beautiful. And, you can hear, so those of you listening, let's say you aren't in a position right now that you're looking for a career. Number one, I cannot wait to read this because I do think there's a
Thank you.
lot for us to gain as entrepreneurs. And I'll have you speak to that in a moment. But, think about who has access to these communities that you can help get this work into. I mean, that's really how, when someone is putting their life's work into the world, it doesn't, our motto is you're not meant to do this alone. But if you're listening
Yeah.
to this and we're moved by this conversation like I am, think about who you can help make this connection to, because truly, this is, I mean, I cannot wait to dig into all the nooks and crannies of this, because this conversation alone has been so enlightening for me. I don't even like that
Yeah.
word, but that's the first word that came to mind.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's so nice. I've never actually listened to a podcast host say like to her listeners, like, think about a way you can help Ashley with her work. And I love that you just did that. It really says a lot about the way you think. And it's such an interesting thing to remember that you don't ever know who's listening, who's reading, who's watching. And that's what makes the world so magical. And for me, that's why I think clarity comes from engagement. It doesn't come
Yeah.
from thought, because when you put so much out there, like what you're doing now with me here, it's like magic can happen. So I'm excited to hear from any of your listeners on how
I
this
can't,
episode was.
now I
Yeah.
can't wait to hear the magical connection. So we can already pre-order the book. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about like the logistics of where to find it, if there's a specific platform where it benefits you most to buy it from, all of the things.
Yeah, thank you. I have a website up right now. It's youturnbook.com. It's YOUTURN book.com. And there's a bundle of free courses you get when you upload a screenshot of your receipt. There's courses on getting a side hustle up and running, life purpose, money mindset, like everything. I think it's like 25 hours of content for free
Wow.
that people get when they pre-order. So YOUTURN book.com.
Okay, so this to me, I'm like, wow, even though the book itself won't come out till next year, that would make an awesome gift if you are a last minute shopper like me, because there's definitely some people in my life who they're going to have Christmas in January. It's fine.
Yeah.
But I cannot think of a better way to show someone in your life that you really see greatness in them than to gift them something like a book like this, whether it's this one or one that you resonate with, but to get that whole content library with it, that's so valuable. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. So we'll link the website and all of that in the show notes, of course. What are you most excited about for the next year? This is like a cool time to just really be leaning into what's calling us forward. Like, what's your next expansion in the new
Yeah.
year?
Well, SoFi, the lending company. Do you know SoFi by any chance?
I've heard of it, but I
Yeah.
don't know it well. Yeah.
Yeah. So they brought me on as their spokesperson like a year ago, and I have loved working with them. And it's really opened my eyes to how much fun it is to create content for a brand who doesn't have career, life purpose, fulfillment kind of content out there.
Mm.
So, what I'm calling in, I think in the new year, I just signed on with a talent agent, is more brand partnerships that allow me to help their audience with this kind of information.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, like sometimes I read my own book and I'm like, wow, this would have been useful for me to know 10 years ago before I made these 10 choices, and everything happens for a reason. So,
So true. Okay, cool. Well, I have just one final question, but before we get
yes.
to that, where can people connect with you, follow you, stalk you on Instagram, all of the things?
Yes. I'm on the gram. It's just my name, Ashley Stahl. It's Stahl. And I would so love to hear from anyone who listens to this episode. What did they take away? What's different because of it? Like, I love that. That I get so high on that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And that, again, just like one of the things that you can do for any guest on a podcast or a podcast you love is to take the time to actually share that. So we cannot wait to hear. And this has been a cool question, especially in light of everything that just happened in our world in 2020, is to like pause and really acknowledge those moments where we are great and we all
Yeah.
have them, big and small, and we just call it your powerhouse moment. So it can be anything. We'll
Mhm.
we'll even extend it. Usually I say like in the last little, like the last couple of weeks, something that you identify as your powerhouse moment, but you can, make your own rules. You can go back as far as you want. We're at the end of the year. Something that sticks
Yeah.
out in your mind is like a total powerhouse moment for you.
Yeah, this year I had a really big powerhouse moment. A huge publisher originally bought my book, and it was a six-figure book advance. And they kept wanting to change things. They kept wanting to change the title because they had a new career vertical coming out and they wanted me to be the face of it. And so they were very in charge of like how it would look. And I ended up just telling them I wanted to pay them back for my book, and I bought the rights back and ended up selling it to a different publishing house without knowing if somebody else would take the book. And so that was a really powerful moment for me to say to myself, like, no matter what opportunities I have, that I don't want them if they're not for me.
Mm, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go back and listen to this episode like 3 times afterward. Legit. And I'm not just saying this. This has been one of my favorite conversations this year. So thank you so much for being here.
What a way to end the year. Thank you.